Hey everyone, welcome to another special edition of Ask an Architect. We're here with the Academy version at the ACSA Administrators Conference. Today with me we have Steve White from Roger Williams University. Steve, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do right now.
Sure. I'm Steve White. I'm the Dean at Roger Williams University School of Architecture, Art, and Historic Preservation. One thing about being Dean that I think is really important is I also teach. And in my case, I teach freshmen. I love getting to know the entering class, and I not only teach lecture components but also a couple of discussion sections so that I can get to know the students directly.
Great. And Steve, we want to get into your teaching experience as well, but you're also an architect, and I wanted to know a little bit about your background. You've been all over the world, had a lot of different positions. Just looking at your background, you've been in San Francisco, you've been in London, you've been in Amsterdam, you've been in New Delhi. What's it like to work in all those different places? Can you touch on them briefly?
Sure. After working for about 3 years when I got out of graduate school, I really wanted to work in multiple places to see what it was like, and in offices that did large buildings. I was very interested in how people use space and in ideas that architecture should serve everybody. And so going to work in a place like India was very important for me. And I worked for a firm, Stein Doshi & Bala, in New Delhi, working on college campuses and working on shading devices. I developed or worked on an office manual for the office between New Delhi and Ahmedabad on the firm's work to have different kinds of shading devices for buildings that they did all over the country. And also did some work on low-cost housing. But I really thought for myself that I wanted to work on projects that could be done for many people and widely. And so my wife and I also did follow the same path. And so we also then worked in Amsterdam for an architect, Herman Hertzberger, and another firm that I worked for as well called Anno Greiner Martin van Goor. Architects, and Hertzberger was a great proponent of figuring out how buildings could really respond to human social interaction. And for me, and my wife, that was very inspiring. And so we worked on some housing projects, a film academy in Amsterdam, and also I think what was really interesting that I didn't think of when it started was working in other offices in other countries. I realized that working in Amsterdam, for example, there were people from Germany and Australia and England who were also working in Spain, the former Yugoslavia. So going to work in Amsterdam was like going to work in an office that had a little United Nations in it, in a way, and so that was terrific.
Was language ever a barrier to getting those jobs?
In those cases, given that India is as part of the British Commonwealth or former British Empire, offices worked in English. In the Netherlands, people made exceptions for us because we were so earnest, like emerging students from AIAS and all the architecture schools, and we were willing to learn some of the language. We didn't function all that well in the field, but we were able to work in teams, and also given the international emphasis in Hertzberger's office among the people that worked there, we would work as part of a team that only functioned in English because that was the only common language, and so that worked out.
So a lot of students, obviously, they see working abroad as a great first step after school. It's a way to go out and get some really unique experience. If you had to suggest one city for somebody to go to or to target, what would you recommend? What's your favorite city out there for somebody to actually potentially work in?
I think certainly a place like Amsterdam is a good place. I think Asia is a great situation because, not to pick on the European Union, but the labor situation is such that if we're not a member of the European Union, a student is able to function, but someone after graduation can't get a visa really. Going to places like India or China, several of our alums have gone on to work in Beijing, and I think if AIAS graduates moved on to places like Beijing or Shanghai, they'd find people from all over the world there.
And much easier access in terms of getting it, or much easier entry in terms of employment.
Absolutely. Yep.
Interesting.
One thing I would say that being a student is a great passport, as hopefully students know. And being on a student visa, you have access to some terms of employment in different places. When they know that you have to leave, that you're not going to settle there, you have to go home and graduate, things like that. So they trust you to be there for a shorter period of time.
That's a great, very practical, tactic to let our students know about, because I think a lot of it's the mystery of just not knowing what the first step is. Is there a lot of paperwork? How am I ever going to make that happen? So knowing that both the language barrier isn't always a huge issue, and the visas and the paperwork are manageable is good to know.
I can throw another thing in on that. Another thing that I think the universities could share more broadly is. We support multiple students through a thing called a career investment program, where the university invests in student work experiences. So if we give a kind of fellowship to a student to work abroad, where they wouldn't be paying, they would just kind of be shadowing in an office or working some in an office, but not paid in a traditional way in that economy. It's another vehicle for a short-term work experience that the universities can really support the students in.
So if students are out there thinking of this, it sounds like there are a variety of creative ways to make it happen. So they should obviously look to their administration and find out what options are available on campus, but also look in and around and see what other options are available.
Yeah. And further on that, just as one example, another great world city is Barcelona. And so one of the study abroad sites is the Barcelona Architecture Center, which Clemson University and Texas A&M have partnered with for a much longer period than we have. But that school, for example, provides the students who go for the study abroad to stay longer and intern in offices in Barcelona. So there are things like that, kind of coupling between study abroad and work experience, that help students make the transition to those experiences.
I like this topic. I want to kind of stay here for a little bit, because I think it's really interesting and pertinent to what our students are seeing or interested in right now. And so I'm wondering about firms in general. Obviously, a lot of different sizes and scopes that students go out and look at. Would you recommend a larger firm that has multiple offices in different places, so that you can stay in one firm, but allow yourself opportunities to grow and maybe move and see different studios and different building types? Is that something you'd recommend?
There are kind of alternate roads.
Lots of paths.
Yeah, a firm like HOK, for example, which I worked with in London, and my wife has worked with, for example, probably for more than 25 years. She's worked in the San Francisco office, the DC office, the New York office, the London office. And she took the path that let her move around within the firm. My path was a little different, even though I was in multiple places. In a way, I think the firms I worked for were very place-based. Working initially in San Francisco for Richard Marshall and Associates, very much a Bay Area aesthetic of fitting into the landscape. When I wanted to move, I didn't have a network other than the firms. So the principal there referred me to India to a colleague, and then I went there. And other ways of breaking down the door, or you write letters, or you send emails and send your portfolio. More and more, I think the balance between choosing a firm that you know something about, that may be a one-office firm with a particular approach, certainly has its value. I admire the mobility that working within a larger firm provides, and I think students sometimes feel, and that we may project to them, that working in a smaller firm is better, or it gives them more attention. At the same time, I think students sometimes get into a dead end a little bit, whereas the resources of a large firm and the projects they have are incredible projects. So there clearly are values to both, but we shouldn't underestimate the resources and the scope of work in a large firm. It's really a great experience.
I'm glad you said that, Steve, because a lot of what we try to do on this show is highlight or spotlight the way it actually happens in the profession, what's going on out there, and to provide some value back to our students in terms of what to think about when you're looking for your first job, or and what's good, what's bad, what are you hearing in school that maybe is different when you actually get out. So I think you've highlighted some points there.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's really important, I've noticed as I've tried to become more and more aware of mentoring and career opportunities. The larger firms have often more opportunity for mentoring because they just have more people, and they have situations and larger projects where people from different age groups or experience in the firm are part of the team, and so you get a chance to be around people that can mentor you a little bit.
Steve, I want to transition a little bit because I'd be remiss if we didn't take this time to go back to Roger Williams and focus on your experience there, but also some of the things that are happening there that are fantastic. Right now, what's the best thing happening at Roger Williams? Why should people check out Roger Williams as a place to go to school?
I think the best thing about Roger Williams is the student culture. And that student culture isn't separate from the way people teach or the learning opportunities or the resources that we have. I think based on the incredible vitality that our student group has had for a long time and the respect we have for that, we've tried to make sure that great things are available for students broadly. For example, the AIAS is so clearly vital from the first year on. We've just thought more clearly about teaching. We have no teaching assistants at Roger Williams, so all of the courses are taught by faculty, and at the same time what that's done is allowed us to create a mentoring structure of student mentors for each other. It's really come out of the AIAS culture. And also, given our location, about an hour from Boston, about 2 hours from New Haven, 3 hours from New York, we have incredible faculty who are available to teach. We have a teaching firm in residence program that brings some of the leading firms around to the school. In the recent AIA New England Awards, 18 out of 41 of the awards were won by faculty or teaching firms that are associated with Roger Williams, which is kind of an amazing. Almost half of the awards, literally in an awards year, somehow our net has been able to bring some of the best talent around to the school.
Well, your location on paper, you think, okay, it's a smaller city. It's not, your New York, Boston, or LA, but yet you have the accessibility to those cities. And I like what you just pointed out, the accessibility to Boston, New York, New Haven, really brings in the talent and also allows the students to go out and see those places.
Yep. Yeah, so we really rely on a net. I think given our location, we really need to be part of a network of places. We're not in one place or other that has that large architecture community.
Yeah. Steve, the Roger Williams AIAS chapter, arguably one of the strongest chapters we have. What do you think specifically about the chapter makes it so strong? Why do they year over year continue to be one of our strongest chapters? What are you seeing locally?
Well, I think locally, we've had in the 30-year history of the school, we've had some ebbs and flows, although the ebbs and flows are ascending. I think we had a remarkable AIAS chapter leader named David Mistretta, who
Mass Design Group.
Right, and he was a real catalyst, and his colleagues, Mike DeCoulos and some others, Kate Ford. The students were so strong together and so collegial that we all saw that, those of us who stay behind every year as they move on to other things. And we tried to make sure consciously that we could build a continuity over time that would last beyond 4 or 5 years, that a student would be there. And I think that's a real key. It came in a lot of ways from the students, and I think myself as a dean and how I see myself as a professor, we really need to respect and honor and build on student potentials and student capacities. And the students are the heart of our school in its culture, and obviously in numbers of students in any school are the largest. We should do a lot more as a profession and as a group of schools to just overtly express that reality. It's so compelling, and the students respond, I think. And I think something over the last 10 years or so, particularly at our school, is we continually see that that is the heart of our school. And that doesn't diminish the design capabilities or all of it springs from that incredible core of collegial students who are dedicated and driven to service, to design, to advancing their educations. It's about the students. And I think that culture has kept building on itself over the last period of time.
Like I said, arguably one of our strongest chapters. And if you're not following Roger Williams on all the socials, Natalie, if you can post the links up here, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, there's a lot of great things happening at Roger Williams, and they showcase it on social media, which is fun. Steve, thanks so much for your time today. I want to end on kind of a fun thing we like to do. Sure, okay. It's kind of a rapid fire 60 seconds of awesome, we call it. Okay. It's a little architectural. We'll try to keep it relevant. And Natalie, if you can put 60 seconds on the clock for us. And Steve, I'm going to give you as many questions as I can. Right. You ready? You bet. All right. Here we go. Starchitect you most admire?
Probably not very interested.
Vinyl records or vinyl windows?
Records.
Negative space or positive attitude?
Positive attitude.
M-Arc or M-Arch?
M-Arc.
New urbanism or old urbanism?
New urbanism because it's more inclusive.
Favorite textile?
Burlap.
Interesting. Postmodernism or post-it notes?
Postmodernism for the variety of expression that it brought in.
Best architectural entry, the Louvre or the Apple Manhattan store?
The Louvre is pretty cool.
Party or part one?
Part one.
Architectural record or Architect magazine?
Architect magazine.
The Fibonacci sequence. The Fibonacci sequence or the golden ratio, Steve? Last one.
Fibonacci sequence.
Right. Well, that wraps it up. Thank you so much for watching our video today, and I hope you got some good value out of it. We'll see you next time on Ask an Architect.